Hey everybody, what's up? Hope you're doing well. I wanted to make a video today on a drum that I've had for a little while. This is a 28-inch bass drum that would be typically used for in a marching or a concert band sort of setting, I guess. So you can see it's a premier bass drum. This thing is pretty well used, but I kind of like it. Fiber Skin Ambassador resonant head. This is the original head. So this drum is 28 inches, but it's actually pretty shallow. As you can see, it's not very deep. Without the hoops, it's maybe 5 inches deep. And that's pretty shallow for a drum like this. Usually these are quite a bit deeper. So what led me down the path of picking up a drum like this and wanting to experiment with it in a recording setting, the way I've seen them being used is in sort of a stripped down acoustic style song. Could be singer-songwriter or Americana or a rootsy kind of thing. And they always sound amazing in those contexts, I think due to the fact that they are so different sounding than something like a modern bass drum like this, which is meant to sound punchy and has double ply heads and muffling in it. Something like this is the total opposite. It has single ply heads, it's a big drum, and there's no porthole in the drum at all. It's going to sound big and resonant, and it's not going to have a lot of attack. It doesn't work in every setting, that's definitely for sure, but for the right song or project, it is the perfect thing, and it can really add a lot of character to a song that it would work in. You could totally just use it with a mallet. What I think is cool about it is actually using it within a drum kit. So using a pedal on it, and I got these extra legs down here that attach on. These are DW legs. They just clip on to the rim and you tighten it with a drum key. That way you don't have to drill any holes in the shell, and that way you can get the bass drum to stay in one spot when you attach the pedal. Should you get one of these drums? I found this drum for fairly cheap on Facebook Marketplace in the city that I live in. I think it was about $100. Yeah, I would say if you can find one of these marching bass drums for cheap, go for it. It's going to add a new sound into your drum collection. This is going to sound completely different. It's going to be the opposite of, most conventional bass drums. So, once in a while you might have a song or a project that would need this sound. Yeah, go for it. I wanted to try a little bit more of an old school sound on this one, so I bought a Remo Fiber Skin. This is an Ambassador single ply head. I think if you're gonna get something like this, this is where it really shines. When you have the single ply heads and you can hear all the resonance. So typically you would use something like this to hit this drum with. This is a large mallet. It's very soft. So what you can do is you could buy a softer bass drum beater. So you could get something like this, which is a soft felt beater, or you could go with something like this, which is probably closer to a mallet in terms of the density of it. You're going to be getting a lot of the low end and tone out of the drum without getting necessarily the punch and the click off of the head, which is, if you're going to use a drum like this for something, you probably aren't looking for that clicky sound anyway. Another way that you could use this bass drum in a recording setting would be to use it as sort of a woofer or a resonator in front of an actual kick drum for a drum kit. If you hit your bass drum, this drum would be right in front, so this would resonate, increase the resonance of your actual kick drum. I think DW used to make something like that back in the 90s or early 2000s. I don't know what they called them, but it's the same kind of idea.
So here's a setup I used this drum for a sample pack and loop pack that I created. The sample pack is called Gravel Roads, which this drum is heavily featured on. There is some muffling on the resonant head of the bass drum just to take away a little bit of the boominess of the drum. And there's a few mics on the bass drum, as you can see. The first and main mic is the large diaphragm condenser right in front of the bass drum, which is a Warm Audio WA-47 Junior. The second mic is a Solomon Low Freak sub-kick mic. The third mic is an Electro Voice 635A omnidirectional dynamic mic. This mic was used as more of a mono kit mic, and it captured more of the batter head of the bass drum. You'll hear this in the Pro Tools mix and how it added some character and vibe to the bass drum. You can also see the vintage wool bass drum beater, and that was an important part of this drum sound as well. So here we are in Pro Tools for this session, and in total there were about 13 microphones used on the drum set for this session. As you can see, some of these are actually turned all the way down. So here's the final result of what we ended up with. If we go through some of these microphones individually, we could start with the overheads. These were small diaphragm condenser Neumann KM184s placed in a spaced pair configuration. There was also a mono ribbon overhead microphone, which was placed directly over the center of the drum kit between the small diaphragm condenser overheads. And this was an Apex 210 ribbon mic. And here's what that sounds like. There wasn't much of this microphone that was used in the mix, but what I ended up doing was sanding this microphone to a reverb sand. And here's what that sounds like. So as you can hear, the overheads are picking up and creating some nice ambience. This is where the drum gets its character, and its roomy sound is from the overheads and the reverb. I didn't end up using the room mics or the sub kick in this mix, but I did end up using the large diaphragm condenser, the WA47, and here's what that sounds like. Here's the snare top microphone. Snare bottom. And here's my favorite mic, the Electro Voice 635A dynamic mic. And here's what that sounds like. This mic also has some processing on it. It has a Devil Lock by Soundtoys, giving it some distortion. Here's what that mic sounds like without the Devil Lock. So Devil Lock does add quite a bit. Here's what the drum mix sounds like without the Electro Voice 635A microphone. Here's with it. So that mic does add some nice character to the bass drum. On the drum bus itself, there's a little bit of EQ, some top end, and a bit of 3K being added. Also a bit of low end at 80 Hertz. And there's a bit of distortion going on with these virtual channel and mix bus emulation plugins. If you dig these loops and samples and want to check out the sample pack, it's on my website, which is linked below. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you next time.